Hi and welcome to Step by Step. My next several videos are all going to form a series, and it's all about this stuff: food and feeding. So this video aims to address the big question, and it's always the big question, and it is: how much should I feed my fish and how often should I feed them? Video 2 is going to be all about feed and what to feed, and also talk about the different adaptations that fish have in terms of where they prefer to feed within the water column, and also food size as well. Video 3, hopefully you find that one interesting, because I will be telling you, I'll be giving you some tips on how to feed. So it's about when to feed, the best foods for a biOrb, and I think that there are foods that suit a biOrb better. How to feed at different heights within the water to make sure that all your fish are getting a feed, and how to feed in a way that reduces your maintenance. So, first video: how much? The big question. Overfeeding is a major problem, and it's probably something that is a common mistake for a lot of fish owners, and hopefully they'll learn through that mistake. And that mistake is not helped by fish that are opportunistic. It is in your fish's DNA to always appear to be hungry. that is the problem. It's a bit different to having a dog or a cat, because when you fed them, they get full and they leave you alone. But fish don't do that, and they still act hungry even when they're full. Half an hour later, they will act like you haven't fed them. What's the problem with overfeeding? Well, there are numerous things. If you overfeed, your fish produce more waste. In other words, they waste more of the food because it passes through their system. They also have a tendency to avoid or ignore some food, so you get lots of uneaten food that falls down to the bottom of the aquarium. As a result, the nitrates in your water, if you like, the pollutants in your water, rise, and they rise. Not only do they rise, but they rise too quickly. You get things like algae growth and diatoms. If you don't know what diatoms are, they're what most people would call brown algae. You might see things like detritus worms, if you know what they are. You sometimes notice them. If you have them, you'll notice them. And they're not problematic, by the way, at all. They're just an indicator that you might just have a bit too much waste on the bottom. And they're tiny little white worms, and they wriggle. And occasionally, if you have them, you'll see them in the water column. They'll swim around. So if you see those, it's not a problem. Arguably, they're part of the cleanup crew. So, and the other thing is water clarity as well. Your water clarity will suffer if you've got too much food waste in your aquarium. Your sponge filter will become clogged much too quickly, and your fish, and I'll talk about this a bit later on, will have fairly rounded bellies because they're eating too much food. Now, the opposite to overfeeding is underfeeding. Now, it's quite interesting that the underfeeding list of problems is much shorter than the overfeeding list. So, if underfed, fish will tend to have skinny bodies. They will often have a paler colour, or paler than what they perhaps should be, and they will also have sunken bellies. And when I say sunken bellies, I mean a drawn-in stomach. So as I said, that is a much shorter list than the list I just said for all the problems. So going back to that sort of question, how much, how often? Now, when you go on the internet, you'll get such a large response or varied response to those questions, and they never really answer the question. So that's what I'm going to try and do. So I had a quick look before, and one of them was as much feed your fish as much food as they will clear up within 5 to 10 minutes. Now, 5 to 10 minutes to me sounds like a hell of a lot of food. If they haven't cleared it up in that time, I think we've got to. I'm not sure what size fish they're talking about in that, but there you go. Another one, feed as much as your fish will clear up in 2 to 3 minutes, and that's quite a common one actually. I read another one that said feed as much as they will eat and in 30 seconds, which I sort of think, well, that sounds reasonable. But the problem with all of those and all of this guidance is it doesn't really help people. The question is, when is food cleared up? Now, you'll notice even if you give fish a very light feed, they will peck around at bits of food for an hour, 2 hours, even more. So is the question that the fact that picking up small bits, they are still feeding. You know, you're sort of, because you're giving them a small quantity, they are then starting to look around for food, which is a really good thing. But they will do that throughout the day. Now, the other slight problem, if you like, as well, is perhaps with the manufacturers of food, because they only want to do one thing. they want you to use food, and they want you to buy more food. So maybe that's not everybody, maybe that's the wrong thing to say, but I think you've got to take that in as well. Okay. In my view, this timing approach, this guidance about timing, how long it takes to clear them all up, I don't think that works very well. I can think of an exception where it would do. For example, those people who have like a sort of koi carp and in a large pond, and they always feed them floating sort of pellets. You'll know when those carp have cleared all those up, they've gone. So you can say, right, it's the time for them to clear all those up within X number of minutes, and that's it. So that does work quite well, I would guess. But trying to find a yardstick about, well, what is the quantity? Not the time, what's the quantity I should feed my fish? And the only one you'll probably find is the much debated guidance, which is only feed an amount of food that's equivalent to your fish's eyeballs. And now, I'm sure that's going to make some people laugh, and it is quite amusing. But there is something in that, to be very honest, and it only applies to really to small fish. The guppy type or the smaller fish, sort of the typical fish that we would have. But the reason I quite like it is because it does give an indication of how small the amount of food needs to be for each fish. So if you can imagine, I'm not saying you dissect your fish, but if you can imagine what the 2 eyeballs of a fish is and translate that into food, that is what we're talking about per fish. Okay, so that is the only thing really that you'll find, and I said it is much debated, mainly because it's not always true that the size of a fish's eyeballs are the same size as the stomach. And as I said, size. If you looked at the eyeballs of a shark, for example, and compared that to its gut, you'll find it has a much larger gut than its eyes. So that's that. So what are the key things about feeding? I'm going to tell you what I think you should feed in terms of quantity. But the key things are that a healthy fish should always be hungry, okay? Not overfed, always be hungry. And it's better to feed less than it is more. And also, I think it's useful to make your fish work for their food. What I mentioned before, where you put in a light amount of food and those fish go around looking for bits and bobs, and they can do it for quite a long time actually, but make them work for the food. Don't feed them so much that they just ignore all the other stuff, and that's part of your waste issue. So, yeah, okay then. How much food would I give a 30 litre that had 7 guppies in it? Right. I'm going to get out what I think I would feed them. So if I was going to feed 7 guppies in a 30 litre, okay, and I'm only going to talk. This is just about one feed. This is the daily feed for 7 guppies. I would put in about that much food, no more, and that's probably a bit too much. Probably about that sort of amount of food, if you can see that. It's funny because I was going to use a British pound coin, then I thought, well, hang on, there's lots of people that probably might not even know what a British pound coin. So it's about that sort of amount of food there. That is what I would feed. Let's get it off. Around about sort of 7 guppies. That's what I would feed them. That's how much food I would give them. Now, some people might go, oh, well, they're hungry. Let's just give them this amount. Now, to me, that is far too much. You will start to have problems with your aquarium and your fish. So there you go. That's how much I would feed 7 guppies. In my view, less is more, if that makes sense. But it's something you've got to keep an eye on, and really until you establish exactly what that right level is. And in this bit here, I'm going to talk about how you can spot overfeeding and underfeeding. And the answer mainly is to observe the bellies of your fish. So I'm telling you to do a bit of belly watching. So when a fish is properly fed, it'll have a slightly rounded sort of belly shape. When a fish is overfed, it will look like it might be having babies shortly. Okay, so a slightly rounded belly shape for quite a good part of the day is what you need to look for. Now, when a fish is underfed, you'll get the opposite. You'll get a sunken belly, or like a concave shape. The fish will clearly look like it's dented inwards. So feed lightly and just keep an eye on your fish's bellies. That's what I do, and I'm always looking for that slightly rounded, not too much, just slightly rounded shape. And you will see it if you look for it. You've probably not even looked at that before, but just have a look at the bellies, of all the fish, and look for that slightly rounded look. It's a really good indication. So feed lightly. Always bear in mind the sort of the eyeball thing when you're thinking about it, only because it's sort of indicative of small amounts, and I prefer that idea that actually it's quite a small amount of food per fish. Do that over time, over a week. Now bearing in mind that fish can go for up to 7 days without any food, so just keep an eye on the bellies of your fish over time, and if necessary, just come down a bit in terms of the food quantity, and if it's the other way around, just slightly increase it. Which moves me on to, I suppose, the last part of that question, which is how often should I feed them? Now, most fish, their digestive systems work on around about 16 to 20 hours, and that's to fully digest their food. And that's in warm water, by the way, as well, not cold water scenario. So in warm water, 16 to 20 hours. Now, it's my view that most fish will do very well on 1 feed per day, and the only exception I would say to that is if you're dealing or have very, very young fish or sort of fry, that those baby fish, if you like, need to have small quantities and fairly regular. You might feed them quite a few times or more through a day, but in terms of reasonably adult fish, 1 feed per day. Why? Why only 1 feed a day? You may ask. I feed my fish 5 times a day and they're happy. Well, okay, fine if you do. So why? Yeah. Well, the 1 feed a day fits in very well with the time to digest food. So that means by the time, that even it takes up to 20 hours, by the time you go to feed them again, what you've allowed is for that fish's gut, its intestines, whatever you want to call it, its gut has dealt with the food that it ate the day before. It's cleared it. It's gone. Okay. Now, the problem with the problem with feeding, for example, twice a day, you think, okay, I'm just going to give it twice a day. I'm just going to give a much smaller amount. The much smaller amount always leads. It will always lead to being just a little bit more. Okay, just a little bit more. And if you're going to feed, that's why I prefer once a day. I know the amount. I put in that amount. If I did it twice a day, the only way I would do twice a day is I would measure out what I would normally give them. One feed, and I would put that somewhere, and I would split it 50-50, and I would take half, and I would feed the fish, and then later on in the day I'd take the other half and feed the fish. Now that would work, but the idea of feeding fish little bits through the day, taking it out of a pot, I can almost guarantee you'll end up feeding your fish far too much. Hopefully I've answered the question of how much and how often, and it's at least what I do anyway. So, and all my fish are healthy, and they're all long-lived as well. I never have problems, and my water conditions are all good as far as I'm concerned. So there you go. Really, the take-home message is try, in a way, aim for hungry fish, not overfed fish. Don't overfeed them through feeding too many times during the day. Try just feeding once a day and just get that done, okay? And then sort of, with a small quantity, make the fish work through the day looking for little tiny bits to clear up and not just ignoring it, which is what they will do. If you do that, I think you'll see benefits in your fish, but you'll also start to see benefits in your aquarium. So I hope you found that useful. That's certainly what I would do, and I will see you on the next video. I'm starting to feel like I'm doing a food channel by having this as a series, which I probably am. Yeah, welcome to the food channel, and and I will see you on the next video. As I said, I hope you liked it. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. And take care, and I'll see you on the next video.